Welcome back to the Joust About Careers podcast. This is the place to learn about careers from the people who are actually doing the work every day. I'm your host, Brian Brott, and this week's guest is 2015 Van Buren graduate Nathan Maynard, an assistant public defender in the Youth Defense Department of the Ohio Public Defender's Office. In this episode, Nathan shares how a typical day looks in his position, how an event while in college working toward a supply chain management degree piqued his interest in a law career, what students can be doing now to set themselves up for a career in law, and much more. Whether you are interested in a career as a lawyer or public defender or are still exploring your options, I hope that what Nathan shares today will help all of you make better career decisions and have fulfilling career journeys. Enjoy the show. Nathan, thank you very much for joining me today. And I'd like to start out by learning more about how a typical day looks for you as an assistant public defender at the state level.
Yeah, so I'm in a little bit of a unique position. I'm in the Youth Defense Department, which means I represent young people. And at the state level, that generally means post-disposition, which is basically after trial, after everything's been settled. So I spend a lot of time traveling around the state to different facilities where these youth are held in detention. So I try to avoid typical days because it tends to be typical week is a better way to frame this. So I'll generally have 1 or 2 visits a week where I'm going in and talking to kids. And my representation tends to be about the conditions of confinement, which is just basically ensuring that their constitutional rights are being protected and not being violated by these facilities. I also do a couple of other random things. So in the juvenile system, they're allowed to request judicial release from their judge to be released prior to the end of their sentence. So I can help them with motions for that. I can help them with confinement credit, which basically just means they get credit for any time they spend in a different facility. So there's some assorted motions I help these kids with. So generally, like I said, I'll do 1 or 2 visits a week. My days before and after are generally preparing, making my list, getting things around, printing documents. And then after, obviously, following up. A lot of times that's following up with the Department of Youth Services. You're going to probably hear me say DYS a lot. That's the state department that runs these facilities. So following up with DYS staff with any concerns that the kids have. And if it's something serious enough, reaching out to superintendents, immediately talking with them. So that tends to be my normal week. I'll have occasional hearings on those motions. So I'll be in court rarely, I would say, maybe every other month or so. But most of my work is actually in facilities talking to these kids.
How many people are there like you in the state public defender's office?
So there's 2 of us that actually do this specific work, the conditions of confinement work. And that's in the whole state. So there's some pressure that comes with that. But we also have a team of about 12 attorneys that deal with youth defense generally. But there's only 2 of us that do that conditions work. So everybody will go to facilities occasionally, but me and the other conditions attorney tend to be there, like I said, pretty often.
Right. Are there other areas in which a public defender can work other than youth defense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So youth defense is just obviously one department of a broader agency, OPD. And they represent anybody. So any defendant that can't afford an attorney is somebody where you tend to get public defenders. In Ohio, that tends to be at the county level is when you'll have trial representation. So I know you had Ian Rafferty on this podcast before. He works at Hancock County. And so they represent people at like the trial and pre-trial level. There's some trial attorneys at the Ohio Public Defender's Office as well. But for the most part, we do post-disposition or, post-trial work. So that's, dealing with appeals, doing, prison intake and legal services. So when, people are actually coming into prisons and jails. It's like I said, the state level tends to be post trial level.
That's interesting. I've never thought about, the people that support them during the trial are different from the people that support them after the sentencing has been made and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, something I do a lot is I talk with those county level attorneys because when kids have questions about their case, obviously I'm not the one that was there. So, it is a very collaborative environment. It's a lot of talking with people from all counties. And honestly, I mean, I think attorney work in general. So me and my wife are actually watching the show Suits, which is a fun show, but also not accurate. So I like to remind people that like attorney work is not all, walking in and slamming a folder on the table and being like, I solved the problem. A lot of the time it truly is just talking with other attorneys, talking with the people you work with, and trying to find the best path forward. And a lot of that is collaborative, as much as it can be, which is, interesting because criminal law and the juvenile law is obviously an adversarial process. You tend to have a prosecutor and a defender. But yeah, I like to remind people it's not like the show Suits most of the time. It's truly not.
It's amazing how often I hear that most times real life is nothing like TV and movies.
No, yeah.
Did you always plan to focus on youth defense, or is that something that just came about? Whether it is, once you started with the public defenders, that was the position that was open. What led to that?
Yeah, so it was not something I was planning on at all. My undergrad degree was actually in supply chain management. So I did a lot of business classes. So when I went to law school, in my head, I was like, oh, this would make sense to then move to a business environment. As I was going through law school, and then actually I took a clerkship, which is just basically like an internship for law students. I did one at the Department of Job and Family Services, which definitely made me appreciative of like public service, working for the state. I think that also jived with my personality a little bit more. I'm not the type of person that wants to go to a law firm and work 60, 80 hours a week. So that helped narrow that down. Then my second clerkship was actually with an education law firm. So it was representing school boards, which, is an interesting proposition because there's a whole bunch of laws and the General Assembly passes more education laws than any other type of law. So it's always changing and it's always exciting and you're always learning something new. And that's kind of where I got the desire to work somewhere in that area, which actually does butt up against youth defense law quite a bit. So yeah, when I was looking my last year of law school, I found a clerkship in the youth defense department, which then after I passed the bar turned into a full-time position as an attorney there. It's always exciting. It's similar to education law in that it's a very niche practice. Like you're not going to find a lot of people that you do youth defense work. So you do tend to have to be willing to learn brand new things. Like there wasn't a lot of youth defense classes in law school. It was kind of like you get tossed in and you get to find out as you go. Right. But yeah, I mean, it was important for me throughout my law school career to just be trying things. And I think that's just good advice for as you go to college. I mean, even before you go to college, you don't know what you like until you try it, right? You don't know what that day is until you watch somebody do it. And that definitely helped me narrow down to the point of like, oh, this is something I want to pursue and something I want to do long term.
Right. I had no idea that the most laws passed by the General Assembly are related to education. That's interesting.
Absolutely.
Okay. When you were a student at Van Buren, preparing to graduate, you ended up going to Eastern Michigan University and earned a degree in supply chain management.
Mm-hmm.
Was that degree what you were thinking when you graduated from high school, or did that come about once you got into college? And then what led you to say, I want to go on and get my law degree?
Yeah, so supply chain management was what I went to college for. It's actually why I picked Eastern Michigan specifically. It seemed like a good mix with my personality, a good match with my personality because it's data driven and it's a lot of numbers, but it's also, somewhat people facing. It's not just like an accountant, which is what a lot of my families were, which was not appealing to me. But you get kind of the best of both worlds, being able to interact with people and collaborate while also being kind of a data driven job. I just happened into moot court, which is, you may have heard of mock trial, which is, you pretend to go through a trial. Moot court is a similar thing at the appellate level. So it's you pretend to go through an appeal. And I was just taking a gen ed class and one of the professors was the coach of the moot court team, and I got like in one of his classes, he convinced me to join the moot court team. I was like, sure. And I wasn't doing anything that semester. I'm like, another extracurricular sounds great. As my family and my now wife would tell you, I'm great at arguing. So why not do it? I actually, that is how I fell into, oh, this is a lot of fun to research the law, to get up in front of somebody and argue it. And I started doing moot court then, and I started taking more political science classes and law classes, and I ended up minoring in public law and government. And as I was going through moot court is when I was like, okay, maybe this lawyer thing is something I want to pursue. And that's how I ended up, starting to apply to law schools and then going to Ohio State.
If you had to do it all over again, do you look back and say, man, I wish I had gone into political science or pre-law from the start? Or do you feel like this worked out well and you probably wouldn't change anything about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would actually recommend, if you think you want to go to law school, don't do pre-law, don't do poli-sci. I think that's what most people when you're in law school will have gotten a political science degree or will have been on a pre-law track. And I don't think that hurts to, talk to advisors about that. That's also what you want to do. But I think it's very helpful to have a more well-rounded experience in college. And I think it helps you even like down the road if you're like application process to stand out, to be like, this is something else I did. It's like I said, for me, it just gave a more well-rounded experience. It kind of helped when I went to law school. I was like, oh, I can then use this if I do business law. And when I was doing like a clinic in law school, I was doing business law. And I was helping, local small business owners. And I was like, oh, I have some idea when you start saying, like these supply chain words, like I'm like, oh, okay, I know what this is, and I can maybe help with that a little easier. And I think at least I felt like just with like the minor in public law and government was enough baseline. Because when you get into law school, it is kind of you reset. Like we're going to teach you a brand new type of school. We're going to teach you in a new way. And I think there's up and downsides to that separately. But I think, there's no big advantage to be like, oh, I'm going to do pre-law here. And honestly, as a practical matter, if you get to law school, you find out, hey, this isn't for me. If you have, a different degree like supply chain management, oh, this is a good fallback plan that I have. Because like I mentioned, you don't know if you like things until you do. In law school, it's definitely one of those things that you either, some people really excel in it and some people really struggle with it. And it's, like I said, it's a different type of schooling. So, you may not like it, and that's perfectly fine. And having, like I said, a backup plan may be a good idea.
You chose to go to Ohio State and graduated from there with your law degree. Was Ohio State your first choice? Are there other schools out there that would be great options for someone wanting to go to law school? And maybe talk a little bit about that application process and what does it take to actually get into a law school?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a bunch of good law schools, even just like in Ohio. ONU, Toledo, Cincinnati, there's a couple up in Cleveland I don't know as well too. And the reason I picked Ohio State is just because growing up in Ohio, everybody knows Ohio State, right? It is known as a premier, learning institution, and specifically the law school is, one of the best ones in the region, right? So there is a draw there to go, and I think it probably did help me get this particular job because being in Columbus, where a lot of law things happen, just by virtue of being the capital, it's a good place to be, and I think it worked out well. But by no means is that the only option. I was very close to going to Cincinnati. It was up in the air for a while there. In terms of the application process, it can start pretty early. It can start like in the sophomore, junior year of your undergrad if you want it to. There's a test called the LSAT, which is, I would say, kind of like the ACT-ish, that you would take while you're in college. And law schools right now tend to look at your GPA and your LSAT score as kind of a baseline. Obviously, once you get further in the application process, they're going to look at your extracurriculars and all your job experience and all that good stuff too. But it really does matter just to get your application in the door, your LSAT score and your GPA. So it was a transition I had to make, for sure, when I started, like, oh, I'm definitely going to want to go to law school. So I'm going to have to take my grades very seriously, which is something I did not do well in high school. I don't know if you remember. It was something that I was not very good at, applying myself. And, I think part of that is just, I didn't know what I wanted to do yet, maybe, and I didn't have focus. But, it's important to, really just apply yourself to the best of your ability, for sure. If it's a path you want to do even more school. But then after, you take the LSATs, you generally have, good amount of essays, normal application stuff, that you can kind of talk about, which again is where I think a lot of the trying new things is helpful, because a lot of these essays, are going to ask about your experiences. What have you done? What have you enjoyed? What have you not enjoyed? And to make yourself really stand out, especially if you're trying to go to Ohio State or, one of those top tier law schools, they're going to look for more than just a GPA and LSAT. They're going to look for those life and work experiences.
If there's a student out there considering a career in law, what do you think is the most important thing for that student to know before he or she takes that leap?
I would definitely say no. It's a long haul, right? Because you're going to go to college for maybe 4 years, maybe less if you did AP and other things. You're going to go to law school for probably another 3 years. And kind of alluded to before, no, it's something that you're going to want to do. And I think the only way to do that is to try it out. I will say something that I've found just throughout law school and being an attorney now is attorneys are very welcoming to potential attorneys. Like, they will want you to come along and ask questions, and a lot of them will offer to get coffee with you and things like that. So if it's something you're considering, I would say absolutely talk to somebody who does it. Go to a court with somebody, talk to a judge, do what you can to expose yourself to the profession, because I do think people truly are welcoming and willing to take the time to meet with you and talk with you. And I am too. So, like, if you have those questions, because I know law school can also be a daunting prospect as well.
Yeah.
But like I said, the law school is daunting. The people in it, I think, are approachable and kind. So, anybody else, talk to an attorney, see if it's something that you would be interested in.
Beyond maybe shadowing or, like you said, talking to people, are there any other organizations or anything that maybe high school or even, I guess, college students who are preparing for law school that they could maybe get involved with that could be useful or look good on the application, or just, give them more chances to learn?
Yeah, I would say definitely get involved with your community in a lot of ways, because a lot of what the law is, I mean, if you think about it, the laws are constructing what you can do in a community. So, one big way to do that is, dealing with voting and being in, poll worker, or, involving yourself in that process, volunteering, signing the people to register to vote, things like that. I worked at Washtenaw County, in the clerk's office, which handles the vote for, Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor. And we went to trainings on training poll workers and set up, an example voting booth, things like that. And obviously, if you that was for me, who wants to do public service kind of things. If you do see yourself like wanting to do business law or something like that, absolutely, find something in your community outside of school that's related to the topic that you're interested in.
Nathan, you shared a lot of really good information, and the way I end every interview is, what do you know now about careers that you wish you had known when you were in high school?
I was definitely shy and reserved and didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, so I didn't seek things out and I didn't try new things. And I think that's my biggest regret in looking back, is what I wish I did more of. Absolutely, putting yourself out there, trying new things. Because, even when you go to that person and you shadow them and you're like, this is something I don't want to do, which is something that happened to me. I shadowed a graphic artist and I was like, I don't have this talent. And also, I don't think I want to do this all day. It's like, okay, let's cross that off the list and we know what we're going to next. So I think being a little more willing earlier to try new things. And then, like I also said, is, apply yourself in school truly. I don't think you may necessarily realize how big of an impact it has down the road, even just for scholarships and also just getting in good habits, like being able to study, being willing to talk to your talk to your peers about schoolwork, preparing yourself for when it does get harder, you do have that baseline to be able to, support yourself through.
Nathan, I really appreciate all of those insights, and obviously thank you for the work you're doing for the state and protecting and helping people that are maybe some of our most vulnerable people. So thank you very much for all of this. And again, if people are interested, hopefully they'll reach out to you. We'll have your email at the end of this episode. And good luck as you continue your career journey.
Thank you very much.
If you liked this Joust About Careers episode, you can explore previous episodes and highlights to learn about even more careers of Van Buren graduates. To be sure you don't miss upcoming episodes, please click subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform so you'll know when the next episode is released. Thank you for spending a portion of your day with us, and we hope you will continue to prepare for your future by learning just about careers.